Hey everybody, Molotov Mitchell here. Today we are thinking about justice, social justice, justice for this person, justice for this cause. When there's no justice, there's just us. People are very passionate about the word justice these days, probably more than I have ever seen. But when you ask people to explain what justice actually means to them, they normally have difficulty articulating it. They stumble. I want to learn more about justice. You want to learn more about justice. Let's ask somebody who literally holds the title. I asked a friend of mine to come by the studio. He was kind enough to share his time and his wisdom with us. This is the interview with North Carolina Supreme Court Justice Phil Berger. So tonight you picked the Stella Artois Solstice Lager. Yes, the Solstice Lager. Good choice, my friend. I actually think this is a really great beer. And this is not at all like the commercials when they take the knife and they...
Thank you, sir.
To the blue crabs.
Thank you.
For people who are at home don't understand what that is, it could be the color of your shirt.
Well, so before we went on camera, we were talking about horseshoe crabs that are
Horseshoe crabs, yes.
Yeah, prevalent on the coast of Delaware, and apparently they have blue blood. And we were trying to describe the color of the shirt to not include Carolina blue. So
right,
right, yeah, horseshoe crab blood blue.
There you go, horseshoe crab blood blue.
Yeah.
Going to fly off the shelves,
That's
I guarantee.
right.
Yeah, so you are Phil Berger. You are a Supreme Court justice here in North Carolina. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
We've known each other about a year now.
Yeah.
Kind of like knew similar people, for years before that. But why don't you tell me about your background, schooling, how you ended up on the high court?
Yeah, so I grew up in rural North Carolina. Went to Moorhead High School in Eden and just really enjoyed growing up in that environment, in that atmosphere. Went off to college at UNC Wilmington, met my wife down there while we were in school. And at some point transitioned from wanting to be a teacher and a coach into wanting to go to law school.
Did you do law with the family then? It sounds like that's the path.
Yeah, so went from Wake Forest back to Rockingham County and practiced with my father and my brother at one point, and then decided to run for district attorney.
Are all Supreme Courts the same from state to state, or are they different?
Well, so the basic requirements are the same. You have to be an attorney and you go through some selection process, right? In North Carolina, we elect our judges. Some states they're appointed by the legislature, others by the governor, and some have a system where it's a merit based on selection by a group of different individuals, like bar association. But in North Carolina, we elect our justices and judges.
So you had to run for office.
I did.
What was that like? I mean, I'm sure that you can't say you're on this side of an issue or that side of an issue as willy-nilly as any normal politician, right?
Sure. So the Code of Judicial Conduct prevents us from making comments on issues that may come before us or talking about cases that are currently pending.
Now, is that the same for every state or just for North Carolina?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
Most states have some prohibition against public pronouncements on issues. You can always talk about your experience, talk about your background, and how that background shapes your judicial philosophy. We're able to get out in front of the public. We're able to explain who we are, but we don't compromise our independence and impartiality by staking ourselves out on issues. Now, the interesting thing about that is if a citizen comes up during a campaign and says, hey, what do you think about this hot button issue?
Yeah.
Right? We sound like a typical politician. I can't tell you my position on that, right? But when you explain the reason behind it and the Code of Judicial Conduct, most people understand.
I'm very fair.
Right.
Right?
And so I'm on record.
Which, of course, every justice is going to say.
Well,
true or not, right?
Everybody thinks they're fair, right?
Well, of course, yeah. So, I mean, how do you let people know,
I'm more fair than
right, yeah.
So I'm on record in an opinion saying that judicial elections are boring, right? Because we can't say a whole lot. But But I think people want to know how will you interpret statutes in the Constitution?
Sure.
Are you going to make it up as you go? Or are there some guiding principles that you follow?
Are you an originalist, for instance?
Right.
You can answer that.
Sure.
Are you an originalist, by the way?
I am. So I believe that we should follow the text of the law wherever it leads. And other judges who profess to be living document theorists see this sort of like an athletic contest, that we are rooting for a result. And really what we should be doing is rooting for the law to be followed.
Supreme, an English word that comes from the 15th century French word suprême, which derives directly from the Latin word supremus, which means the highest. And of course, the highest fast food restaurant in the South is, without a doubt, Bojangles, which serves chicken tenders, but they don't call them that. No, they call them chicken supremes. Now, if you were to translate that into French, I believe it would be suprême de poulet. Years ago, I had the pleasure of meeting U.S. Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas at a dinner. I don't believe that we were having suprême de poulet that evening. I think it was just tough poulet. I asked him a couple of questions, and one of them was why he was so quiet. On the high court, often his colleagues would write these lengthy opinions following verdicts, but he was largely silent. He said with a twinkle in his eye that often his colleagues were just showing off when they wrote those. He already made his opinion pretty clear when he cast his verdict, yay or nay. When I was a boy, I was babysat by Mark Martin. Mark Martin would go on to become Chief Justice Mark Martin of the North Carolina Supreme Court. I don't know why I didn't mention this to Phil Berger, who is currently on that court. I guess it's just trivia, kind of like the Supremes are a singing group from back in the day, Motown. I think they're Motown. If somebody put a gun to my head, I'd say Motown. Anyway, Mark Martin is now the Dean of Law for Regent University. Great guy. My favorite kind of specialty pizza, meat lovers. My second favorite, supreme. What's your fitness routine?
So I come here to TKM and I work out here and just enjoy coming to punch on the bags and learn new techniques for self-defense. I've really enjoyed the time and just grateful to you for inviting me to be a part. About a year ago, you sent me an email and said, hey, you should come try this. And I thought, what on earth? There's no way. and then finally I went, okay, I'll do it, and just had a blast and have learned so much and just appreciate everything you and Jason have done here. But I do that.
I'm so glad to hear that. Yeah, that's great. No, we're happy to have you, man.
Yeah, it's fun, and
you hit hard too, by the way.
Well,
Shane has complained. There's some written complaint now. All right, so we're at the moment of truth. This is where we find out if Phil Berger is hitting at the district, at the superior, or the supreme level. We've got our accelerometer on here. We're going to find out with one good punch what we got. You excited, man?
Yeah, ready to go.
Do it?
Oh, yeah, we can do it right here. All set?
There's nowhere else we'll do it. Okay. We only have one accelerometer.
Gotcha.
Go!
Supreme.
Fantastic. 1282. Normally people would be at a 700 or an 800, so I have to call that the gavel. Gavel. That's justice. So here we are with Andy. I'm up in Massachusetts. Okay, I'll show you Andy. This is Andy, the Tesla commander. And I've never actually experienced ludicrous mode. There's the Mad Russian from Primal Crop. Looking forward to experiencing ludicrous mode, which apparently is supposed to be, very impacting. So I'm really excited about experiencing that. Ready? I'm ready, man. Let's do it. Oh! Whoa! Man, that was crazy. I was spinning. We gotta try that again. The speed he's running. Sick.
Athletics, just a huge part of our family and our background. And, again, thankfully, I've got a couple of outlets.
Feels good to hit stuff sometimes.
It does.
Yeah, I tell you. Just got a pressure release.
And Jason picks on me. I think he picks on me. He sees me and he ramps it up.
For anybody who's watching, Jason's currently controlling the cameras over there from a remote. I know you played baseball.
Played baseball a little bit in college.
Yeah.
And I've coached, for probably 25 years now.
Wow.
Coach at the high school level now. My son is playing baseball in college. I've got another son who's an athlete in high school.
I mean, it just changes your outlook on everything. It changes your mood. You live longer. You're happier.
Yeah, well, and there's some humbling part of it as well, right? Because everybody has a point where they want to quit and want to stop.
Right.
Right. And the really successful people, whether it's athletics, whether it's working out, whether it's business, whether it's family, is those people who are able to push through.
They find their limit and
right.
they surpass it.
And I mean, Jason can tell you, I get in here sometimes and I get frustrated with myself because I'm not mentally strong enough to finish some of the things he's asking, and it upsets me so bad. Competitive, right?
Yeah.
I should be able to do this, and
it's a good thing.
But I think just in life, the more you're able to encounter those adverse situations and persevere, the more you're able to will yourself to certain outcomes.
It is not the sun that causes us to grow. It is the rain. It's the adverse parts of life. I think there's a real push against that today too, which is, I'm feeling that as a guy who owns a place that helps people get there, right? I get a lot of pushback when I mean, there are other gyms that go the opposite direction. They're like, whatever you want to do, you just do that. And we're not going to set any bars.
That's the participation trophy society that we live in, that we don't want people to fail. The most important thing is not failures, it's your response to failure. I think athletics puts you in a position to experience failure more than any other situation.
Acutely, for sure. Right. It's right there.
Yeah, you either hit the ball or you don't.
Yeah.
Right. You can either throw a strike or you can't. And the really successful people have whatever it is in them that says, all right, next time I'm going to do better. And if you never experience that failure, you're going to have the fragileness that we do in our society now.
And you can do anything that you put your mind to. And there's a very real and dark force, I'll just say that, an evil force in our society that tells people you can't.
Right.
And if it hurts, stop. A lot of people are very confused about the notion of justice. And when you add these qualifiers, for instance, like social justice, or you add qualifiers to the word correct, like politically correct, in my mind, it almost reverses the meaning of the intended word. I saw a sign. I just want to make sure that I read it exactly as I saw it. It was at a church. I was with my family, and I was talking to my daughter about justice when we saw the absence of judgment is love. The absence of judgment is love was on a church placard. Is that a true statement?
I don't think so.
Why not?
Well, because we have a fundamental sense of right and wrong, or at least we, as a society, we should. Again,
But isn't that judging?
Well, no.
It's not?
Is stealing a social construct? If stealing is a social construct, then judging is wrong, right? Our laws come from God.
Okay.
And God has established that there's at least 10 things that you really shouldn't be doing. Right.
10 very clear ones, yes.
Right. And so if we believe that the law of God and the law of nature are the foundations of our society, then there is a notion of right and wrong that is built into our justice system. So it's funny. We used to always ask a question during jury voir dire when I was a prosecutor. Do you have strong religious or moral objections to sitting in judgment of another individual? Right, and every once in a while you'd have someone say yes, more likely trying to get out of jury service than anything else. But so we asked that question. But in my mind, that question is sort of just to throw out to soften what their real job is, which is to apply the law to the facts. That's not judging, right? That is saying this fact applies to the law in this way, which means we equal this result.
Yeah.
Right. And so no, I don't believe the sign that you saw is anywhere near correct.
What is justice to you?
Justice is the consistent application of the law over time. Right. And this gets back to what you mentioned earlier about fairness. I'm going to be the most fair.
Right.
Everybody has a different understanding or viewpoint on what fairness is to them. So an individual who walks into court and has some sort of sentence or outcome may think that result is fair or not fair. But it's not necessarily a question of one case. It's a question of all the cases, right? And if the law is consistently applied, the ability for society to look at the results, for society to look at the process and say, no, the law that we have is fair, and the outcomes that are generated, although there may be injustices here and there, the overall application of the law consistently leads to fair results.
If there were unjust laws on the books and you were a justice, do you think you would be doing what is just by executing those laws?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question, right? Would you follow an unjust law? Right. So what about prohibition?
Sure.
And this is really political theory, economic theory. To the extent there are plunders by the government, prohibition is an outstanding example of exactly what you're asking. People had businesses, people have livelihoods, and the government decided that through an amendment process, but started with the government, that plunder and plundering the alcohol industry in America was the thing to do to benefit others. And people chose, in some respects, not to follow the laws of prohibition, right?
Infamously, some of them.
Right. So the role of the court at that point is to apply the law.
Right.
The role of the people is to change the law through their elected representatives.
But do you believe that vigilante justice is ever justice then?
Are there situations where people don't get justice every day, right? People walk into a courtroom and they see a result that they think is appropriate, and they walk out disappointed. There is nothing in our law that can bring back a loved one, right? So does that individual get justice through our court system, or is there another avenue through which they get peace? And certainly vigilante justice is not appropriate in our system because it's not fair, right? It's not what we as society has deemed as fair.
I understand that the majority can agree that something is fair, and then there are outliers. Are there any outliers in history for you where you believe that vigilante justice was just? Or do you believe that all vigilante justice ever was always wrong?
The folk moot, which was the loose jury system that originated out of chaos, right? It said that
you just said folk moot?
Folk moot.
I'm not familiar with that. What is that?
People's court. Right?
Oh,
that the people.
Well, I know People's Court.
Yeah. So
Judge Wapner.
What you are about to witness is real.
Hi, I'm Doug Llewellyn, and welcome to the People's Court.
A little bit later.
So I don't know. He's an older guy. I thought maybe he's the original. I don't know. Folk moot.
Yeah.
OG.
Instead of Farmer B's family going and just wiping out Farmer A's family, Farmer C, Farmer D, and the rest of the farming community said, why don't we get together and come up with some method of repayment, right? Because now that Farmer A is gone, they can't plow the fields, they can't harvest their crop, they can't do all these things, they can't protect themselves. So Farmer B, you have to pay this. You have to give them so much of your wheat. You have to do these things in an effort to try to replace what you've taken away. And at some point, right, there had to be a first. There had to be a one. And at some point, someone said, okay, I'm going to buy into this system. We agree to what the community is stating should be done here. And that establishes a precedent. You know,
Sure.
Look, when Farmer A got killed, Farmer B had to pay 8 bushels of corn. So now Farmer C, you've got to pay 8 bushels of corn to Farmer D's. Folkmood went and established, vigilante justice is not the way we as Western civilization will handle these things.
So you think that there's no vigilante justice that was ever right?
So
Or are there examples of it?
well, I'm sure there are.
Okay. But
And-
there are none that come to mind.
Well, but so what do you mean by vigilante justice?
I mean, somebody took the law into their own hands because this particular individual was able to slip through the cracks through technicalities over and over until finally the people said, we've had enough. I guess this kind of speaks to a much deeper question of what do you believe in our system? Do you believe in America's legal system as it stands?
Oh, absolutely, 100%. And are there individuals who walk free every day who are guilty of what they're charged with? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Are there individuals who walk in and the law is clear that there should be an outcome and a jury nullifies what takes place? Absolutely. Is it right to take the law into your own hands? It's not. It's not socially acceptable in our community. Now, are there examples of self-defense where someone is attacked and in use of defensive force?
Well, if you're talking about self-defense, then that is actually legally codified. I mean,
Right.
that's right.
Right.
I'm thinking of an example. I happen to know a lot of vigilante stories, but there's one that was particularly affecting for me, and there was a father whose son had been abducted by his karate instructor, and he took him across state lines, and when they got the kid back, he'd been sexually assaulted and whatnot. Are you familiar with the story? Well, this was the 80s or the 90s, but what happened was while the news crews were filming this guy being brought in on live TV, the dad turns around from a payphone and shoots the guy in the head, point blank, right there in front of everybody. But when he's tried, no one would convict him. And he ended up not doing any time at all. Something like that happened recently too, when a guy found a guy sexually assaulting his daughter in the stables. I think it was in New Mexico or Texas. And he just mud hole stomped the guy. And now that, in my mind, is definitely vigilante justice.
Well, on some level, there's jury nullification, right? That the jury sees that there are laws on the books and they decide that for whatever reason, they are not going to follow a judge's instructions on what the law is as applied to these facts.
Sure.
Right? And so ultimately, the decision on what should happen with your case, my case, those individual cases rests with the people. And it gets back to our sense of justice from the folk movement.
That's essentially a check and a balance there that the jury of peers is saying, we're going to make an exception here.
Sure. And again, jury nullification is not appropriate, right?
So that's not right. That's not a good thing.
Well, no, but the law as it exists, you take an oath to follow the law, no matter what it is, no matter what result it is reached. That you will use your reason and common sense to apply the law to the facts of this case. And if you tell a judge that you will not follow the law, or you tell one of the attorneys during jury voir dire that you refuse to follow the law, that you're going to do what you think is fair, then that is cause for you to be removed from the case. Now, that is a different question than if you get on the jury and you make a decision. Once that decision is made, it's final and it can't be revisited.
So is that still jury nullification or no at that point?
Yeah, it's still jury nullification. The jury, the people are saying we are not going to follow this law.
Right.
But in North Carolina, that's not the appropriate way for a jury to function.
So it differs from state to state, that aspect of it.
Sure.
see.
Some
Okay.
states do have the ability, and jury nullification is part of a jury instruction.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Like what states?
Well, I couldn't give you examples.
Oh, that's interesting. Do you know of any of them? Or no?
No, I mean
It's a thing, though.
Right.
Okay.
You're
All the
throwing-
kids are
you're throwing
doing
all
it.
kinds of
All the
stuff.
kids are doing it.
Hey, Bill, I'm in the mood for a switch up. I hit the function, hit the rose till I hiccup. I hit the stage and leave with money that's a stick up. She picture perfect, so I told him I'm a flick up. Bill, I'm in the mood for a change up. I leave the city and return with my change up. They got amnesia, don't remember how they played us. They wanna knock me down, but somehow I just stay up.
People often quote Jesus, "Judge not lest you be judged." Are you familiar with this passage?
Yes.
What does it mean to you?
Well, so if you are a Christian, I can't judge your heart.
Okay.
If you're not a Christian, I can't judge your heart.
Mhm.
But if I sit here and condemn you as being a follower of Christ or not, then I'm judging you, right?
Okay.
So
So you're talking about eternal judgment
Sure.
there, right? For me, the thing that's always jumped out is people never go with the next passage after, which is where he says that with whatever measure you judge someone else, it will be accounted to you. Remove a plank from your own eye before you can remove the splinter from your brother's eye. So I think a lot of people, when they say, judge not lest you be judged, they're just not understanding the full context of what Jesus was saying, because there's a paragraph here, not just a sentence. Judge not lest you be judged. You are literally a judge. It's almost like saying you can't be a judge. And a lot of people say that today. They say you can't judge anybody for anything now.
well, God also established a civil government.
Sure.
And there are plenty of passages in the Bible that talk about having to follow the civil law because it's established by God.
Yeah.
Right. So I don't see that we are judging people's heart and judging people's Christianity.
Sure.
I see that we are applying law to fact, and the civil government has established a system of laws, and individuals act in a certain way and behave in a certain way that gets them into conflict with that law. So I don't. Even though we're called judges, I don't see that we judge people. I see that we judge behavior based on the law.
There was actually a really interesting experiment that was done. Cornell and Stanford and several other prestigious schools got together. It was called there it is, Human Decisions and Machine Predictions. This was, man, are you familiar with this?
I'm not.
This is wild. This is crazy. But what happened was they were taking a look at judges who had to make a decision whether somebody would be awarded bail or not, whether they would come back or not, they skip bail. And what they did was they said, they were curious about judgment and in particular, blind justice. Should justice be blind? So they had a computer AI that they pitted against the human judges who could see somebody and hear them talk and see their faces and read their gestures and everything like that. And who do you think won, the computer or the judges?
Well,
I'm just asking, yeah.
Hopefully the judges did.
The computer did far better at predicting who would come back and who wouldn't. It's interesting when it comes to judging people or making a judgment concerning people, reading people. The computer said, I don't want to see anybody. I have all the data. I know that this person has skipped bail 4 times. However, one judge may see that person and he says, I'm telling you, Your Honor, this time. And somehow he tricks it. Should we let computers render decisions like that? Or do we owe it to people to have their face seen, at least for bail?
Yeah, so we live in an imperfect world, right? We
Yes.
work in an imperfect system.
Mhm.
And this notion that somehow judges, juries, prosecutors, defense attorneys are going to get it right every time is just, it's setting people up for failure. And I think that's one of the things that is going on in society today. everybody else needs to be perfect, but I don't have to, right?
Right.
And so so you've got that component to our legal system that it's built on infallible people, or fallible people. And the second part of that, though, is if you were going before a court, would you want a person sitting there that you could speak with, or would you want a computer that you just crunch numbers on? And I think most people, at least at this point in time in our society, would prefer to have, John Smith, who lives down the street and is a member of the community, goes to the Rotary Club, and at least has some notion of what the community standards and norms are, as opposed to a computer that is going to just spit out an outcome, input outcome.
Nobody is suggesting that computers take this over, but I could see Mark Zuckerberg doing that, And it just made me think about the future.
Well, and technology can be very beneficial, and it can improve the way we do our job, but I don't think it should lead to a point where it does our job for us.
In this context?
In this context, in many contexts, I just don't...
sorting potatoes should be fine, right?
Sure, but a potato farmer out there wants to at least have some control, and I think that's the thing. We're prone to bad decisions as we may be. Should we be in charge of the system, or should we somehow allow another entity to make those decisions? And I just think people, it gets back to our folk mood, our ancestors, right? It's a group of people that make a decision. It's not a computer.
It reminds me of Neville Chamberlain, for instance. He had the opportunity to meet with Adolf Hitler multiple times in person, and came back, singing his praises, essentially, saying, he has no interest in invading anybody else. The Sudetenland is going to be left alone. All that. Peace in our time, right?
This morning, I had another talk with the German Chancellor, Herr Hitler. And here is the paper which bears his name upon it as well as mine.
Whereas the computer in England, Winston Churchill, never needed to meet the guy at all, never needed to see his face at all, and said, evil. He read him by the data, not by the man. Right?
All that we have known and cared for will sink into the abyss of a new dark age, made more sinister and perhaps more protracted by the lights of perverted science. Hitler knows that he will have to break us in this island or lose the war. If we can stand up to him, all Europe may be free.
The judicial system is designed to default to freedom and innocence.
Absolutely.
Right.
Innocent until proven guilty, right.
And if that is the default position and more guilty people go free, right, then I think society as a whole, right, on the broad spectrum, sees that as justice.
I was watching the show Fargo. Have you ever seen it?
I have.
Oh man, you like it? Oh really?
Yeah.
Well, I like the Fargo shows, but where I just watched season 4, part of it, and there's it's showing how people came up as immigrants from different places in gangs, and they fought their way to the top, and it's taking place in the 50s after things have already warred their way, and the Italian guy is talking to the consigliere from the black gang, and he's telling me, he says, when I come to this country, I hear people talk about American values.
Land of the free, home of the brave. This, I don't know. And then I learned the history of this country. Your slavery, the smallpox in the blankets, how you stole the land from the natives. And I realized to be an American is to pretend. Capisci?
I did not agree with that, but I understood how some of that's true, that you can become something totally new. Do you think that American values are the values of pretending, or do you think something different when you hear American values?
Something different entirely. It has nothing to do with pretending. Although I agree with you that, and there's a scholar who wrote an article on critical race theory and talks about the American dream and how it relates, or doesn't relate.
Sure.
And he says basically that education and hard work allow you to escape your origin, right? And so to the extent your dreams are embodied in who you are currently, then I think it's okay to pretend, right?
Yeah,
that you have to dress for the job you want, not the job you have. So I think there's some element of
which is why even at the age of 15 you started walking around in judge's robe. It made perfect sense.
But there are dreams that only you can see,
right?
And if you're plotting that path, then I think that's it's completely acceptable, right? To pretend,
sure,
to take on the persona of who you want to be, even though you're just this little guy from Rockingham County, right?
Yeah.
But I think there are American values and there are shared values that include hard work, being a good citizen, right? Having a good education, or at least understanding the need for a good education.
What makes America different when it comes to American values?
Well, I think there's also some notion of property rights that other societies, while they may have in some respects, certainly the property rights and the value that we place on property is much different here than elsewhere in the world. But that property is not just dirt, right? It's not just this table.
Yeah.
We understand that there's a property in your mind and your thoughts, right? And we put that in our Constitution. So whenever I talk about this and whenever I think about it, I go back to the Jim Valvano speech when he gets the ESPY award and he's got cancer. Yeah. And he says, cancer can't touch my mind, right? It can take away my body, but it can't touch my mind.
Yeah.
And that's what our founding fathers thought about property, right? It's dirt, it's things, but it's also your mind. And to me, that's just a powerful thing. You look at communist China, you can't think what you want.
Right.
And if you do think what you want, it leads to possibly death or imprisonment.
The gulags. Yeah.
That is communist and socialist history. Hundreds of millions of people dead because they didn't let them think and act the way free people should act.
I can't even teach Krav Maga in communist countries. It's banned. I mean, even when I taught in Cuba, it was illegally. We had to shake spies that were following us and everything. I mean, they don't mind if you do boxing and wrestling and all that, but Krav Maga, that's a counter-revolutionary system that was designed to kill National Socialists. They're trying to oppress people and take their property,
right,
as well as their lives and everything else. But yeah, you're right. There's a fundamental schism there of not just I own property, but I own myself. And I'm not a subject to anyone.
Right, this notion of individualism. Right. And if you read up on some of the literature now, individualism is a dirty word. Again, your ability to change who you are, to escape your origins is just so ingrained in our culture. And quite frankly, it's the story of my family. My father graduated from high school and went to work at Gypsum, which was pressboard plant in Caswell County. And he's standing at the end of a pressboard machine one day and he says, I want to go back to school. So he goes back to community college, and then he goes to Averett University in Danville, Averett College at the time. He worked at Kroger as a produce manager. Right? He's got two crazy little kids running around. Took him 9 years to go through undergraduate. And at some point he says, not only do I want to graduate from college, I want to go to law school. And you got to remember, Danville's a mill town, right? And the attitude in a mill town is
Mill work.
quite explainable.
Right.
I'm gonna go to
Straightforward.
school,
Yeah.
and when I can go to work, I'm gonna go to work.
Right.
And if I finish school,
One trip.
that's great.
Yeah.
Right. But my goal is to go to the mill and work in the mill.
Mm.
And that's
He was the big dreamer in the
Exactly.
small-minded situation.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Wow.
And to be sure, he and Bruce Wilkinson, who's a Christian author and preacher, calls them border bullies. He wrote a book called The Prayer of Jabez. So he calls these people who want to keep you contained, right? Who want to keep you where you are because they have no ambition of their own.
Right. Crabs in the pot. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Or horseshoe crabs in the pot.
Horseshoe crabs. Full circle.
But these border bullies just want to keep people where they are, and thankfully, right, we have people who don't listen to that voice,
That's
who
right.
don't listen to those naysayers, and in a mill town, that's sort of the attitude, right?
Because it's comfortable.
right,
It's safe.
right,
You can't control safety. I could literally walk out of here, trip, and die. You can't control that. But what I can control is my ability to change the world, which we call dangerous because of our work here, doing combat, hand-to-hand combat. But it's your ability to impact the world, not hide from what the world throws at you.
They turn the lights on, and it's time for you to do something. Is the moment too big for you? And whether that's being dangerous, whether it's fighting the monsters, or whether it's walking up and giving a speech, or swinging a bat, there's no moment too big for me. And it's that attitude you're talking, and an attitude that you guys instill here. That attitude that you can do anything is powerful.
It's been a lot of fun too. It's just great hanging out with you, Phil.
Yeah, Molotov, I appreciate it. It's always good to be here with you and Jason, and enjoy being able to talk with you for a little bit, sort of outside and a little bit.
Yeah, and you're always welcome by the way, anytime.
Thank you.
We've always got a Stella on standby for you.